Rand Fishkin is well known and much loved for his openness, honesty, and sincerity. Above and beyond being a great guy, a snappy dresser, and enviably legible when it comes to groundbreaking writing on anything vertical, Rand's known for his curiosity and breadth of knowledge on technical SEO, on-page SEO, link building, content, keyword research, and all things inbound marketing. Welcome, Rand. Did I miss anything?
No, no, that's perfect. I'm also an expert in how to blow dry your mustache. So
Nice.
if you know more about that, let me know.
Will do. So thanks for putting on another great show this year. I went to MozCon. It's my fourth one. It's worth every cent. There were quite a few Canadian speakers making jokes this year, actually, about Americans migrating post-election results.
That sounds
Um,
about right.
what are your thoughts on the future of your nation?
Well, I mean, the United States is an odd place. I think, tragically, we have a history just rooted in racism and conflict, and that is a really tough thing to get over. I think for a lot of folks who have been part of the majority in the United States for a long time, they feel like equality is actually oppression,
Yeah.
and feelings are not facts, but it doesn't make them any less real, right? Or make them less real to have to deal with in the political world. And I think you're feeling that more keenly in this election probably than at any other time, at least in my lifetime in the U.S., my adult lifetime in the U.S.
Yeah.
I mean, some tremendously amazing people and remarkable innovation, but it also has a very laissez-faire sort of attitude to a lot of things, and a very religiously informed attitude to a lot of things. And some of those make many common sense moves really hard,
Yeah.
from a political or get things done standpoint. So I don't know. I am not actually sure if I'm optimistic about the future of the United States long term. I think I'm very optimistic about the future of about 30 to 35% of the United States who has really
Right.
benefited from the economic and social gains of the last decade or two. But there's a lot of folks who have a really tough time, and all of them absolutely have the right to vote, and they could take us back to some weird places.
Yeah. Well, I find that crazy that it's not compulsory to vote in the US. Um,
Yes, and that is it's very frustrating. It's also an odd thing that one of the primary political tactics historically recently has been only used by one party, but in longer term has been used by both parties, and that is vote suppression. And there's a lot of things that you can do to limit people's access to the polls and to voting. I don't know if you're aware, but you actually have to vote on weekdays here, and you have to actually go to a place. So if you have a low income job that won't let you get off work, chances are good you won't be able to make it to the polls and vote. And a few states have vote by mail. Washington, the state that I live in, where MozCon was held,
mhm.
is one of those. And we see, 70-75% turnaut versus a lot of states with 40% turnout.
Wow.
Wow.
That's really
But
interesting.
unfortunately, yeah, United States politics are very, very strange. And I know unfortunately, the United States, because of its economic and military impact, influences a lot of the rest of the world too. And yet, uh, many of you folks don't get a say, don't get a vote, and that sucks.
Yeah.
It's not exactly fair that this sort of global influencer is only selected by a tiny proportion of the people that it impacts.
Yep. That's true.
Yeah.
So enough about politics. I think we should
Yeah.
switch it back to other things. So when we caught up last time, you mentioned that you were hoping to shave your mustache as soon as Moz became profitable. There's
Yep.
been news lately of Moz reshaping. So will we be seeing the top lip in the near future, and how do you see the future of Moz?
Yeah. Well, Moz. which I'm very happy about, is returning to its SEO roots and going to be focused on SEO for the foreseeable future, rather than trying to be broader inbound marketing and releasing products in the worlds of like social and content and other forms of marketing. So that excites me a lot. I really like being focused. I like having fewer products and fewer channels. But that being said, I think it's also the move is not without its risks, right? We're going to have to execute well. We're going to have to rely on the fact that SEO keeps growing as it has the last few years. I think we sort of took our eye off that ball, and now we need to get we can be best in class around all the functions tools should provide. That's a lot of engineering work, it's a lot of UI and UX work, and then it's a lot of marketing work.
Totally.
I feel relatively good about that, but it's not without its risks. As for the mustache, I suspect sometime between December and March we'll be profitable again, and I'll be able to shave this darn thing off. That'd be real nice.
It sounds like you're looking forward to it.
Oh my god, I can't even it's just.
It must be amazing.
It looks fun sometimes, but the maintenance is a pain in the ass, and you have to wash it regularly. But then every time you wash it, it sort of doesn't hold its shape very well, and it's terrifyingly bushy when it's humid out. So there's just all sorts of problems.
How is life these days compared to when we caught up a couple of years ago? Obviously, you're focusing more being involved on the product and not having to take the helm of a company so much. And have you personally kind of felt a lot more freedom to
I would say that was probably true until July, August, the time frame when we did this, when we did the layoffs, and when the company asked me to contribute a lot more on both the product side and the marketing side. And so now I have much more of I'm not sure if leadership, I guess strategic leadership, if not management leadership role. And that has meant that, I have not had a day free from less than 4 or 5 hours of work, including weekends or holidays or whatever, in many months. 2 or 3, and that it's definitely a much more intense amount of work than I was doing, say, at the beginning of this year. So a little bit frustrating. I sort of thought that Moz needed me less, and it ended up that Moz needs me more again now. So I'll try and do my best to contribute there.
Well, I guess it's hard. I mean, you're a founder, and to a certain extent, you paved the pathway, and you've got tremendous insight into how it's all been established, and you're probably going to be the constant, whereas people change, move around, and You've mentioned previously that you felt that you should have built EVPs, so exceptional viable products, instead of MVPs.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how important is it focusing on search moving forward for Moz?
I think it's going to be pretty important. Keyword Explorer was a pretty good example of that, where we held back on launching until we had gotten some substantive feature sets out. And even then, I think if we'd waited a couple more months and launched with some of the even more powerful features that we've been able to, it would have been an even bigger splash. But I think that we have an obligation to continue to roll things out at least that quality bar. I suspect if we regress and we start releasing stuff that is just crappy again, folks will trust us even less. And I think that's a real danger to the health of the company. So yes, definitely going to keep pushing and leaning on folks to release less minimum and more exceptional products here, but be smart about it too, right? So maybe we might be able to do more iteration inside of products, after they're released, and do more smaller iterative releases inside products that already exist that move them closer to best in class. I think campaigns are a good example of that, where it's sort of like, oh, let's release SERP features. Hey, let's release more granular rank tracking data. Hey, let's release better crawl and better insights. Let's release better on-page optimization scoring. And those kinds of features, related topics, right? They're very small. I would call them MVPs if they lived on their own, but they're part of this big product. And so the big product can clearly stand on its own and serves many customers very well. And then you sort of iterate and add on to that. So I think that might be another way that we can do those faster, shorter term releases.
Yeah, they're awesome, by the way. We love those features.
Oh, thanks, man.
Is Moz going to adapt any machine or deep learning in any of its tools?
Right now, we use ML in Open Site Explorer and in Mozscape for the PA and DA scoring. And we also use it for spam score, although I think we're going to have to retrain that model. 4.0 is fully rolled out, which will probably be, sounds like it'll be a few weeks to a few months. Okay. Hard to know exactly. Google's messaging is not totally easy to interpret. But we will probably be doing the same thing with on-page optimization. So related topics does that a little bit, where it essentially does an extraction of content from the pages that already rank for a keyword to try and learn what terms and phrases Google associates with a given topic.
Nice.
And then and that, that's already in Moz Pro, but I think the machine learning aspect of that will be then using those plus all the other on-page factors to get a really good sense of what the most optimal page looks like, and see which factors correlate best to high rankings in terms of on-page features, and then making recommendations for folks on those. So that could be a machine learning, either a one-time thing that we update regularly, or an on-demand, like let's see if we can take an input of all the pages that you are trying to rank for in your sector with your website against your competitors, and try and learn an algorithm or a system that works best, just for you and your rankings.
That's so cool, because every SERP is different.
Yeah, every SERP is different. I guess, the challenge for me, and Woj, I don't know how to think about this best, right? So like my understanding with RankBrain is Google's essentially saying, when we do query interpretation, at query interpretation time, we're going to figure out which signals to move up and which signals to move down, right? So like maybe for this query, links are not as important and content's really important. Maybe for this other query, engagement's really important, freshness is important, links are important, but the content's less important. So I think they're doing that kind of fluctuation, which could mean that an ML model that is more based against and biased toward your particular search results makes the most sense. At the same time, maybe that is a dumb way to play it, because you might be caring about a lot of different search results where Google is using a lot of different factors, and so those correlation techniques and those ML techniques be not very helpful, because you're only getting a small sample of each different type of query where Google is, using various elements of the algorithm in different proportions, and so you're averaging a bunch of stuff together in ways that you shouldn't be. So, where we're just going to have to spend a lot of time not just trying stuff, but or not just releasing stuff, but build it, then we learn against it, and we test with it, and only after we see good results do we release it. Otherwise, we could be giving some very bad advice, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It'd be real shady if we were like, oh yeah, we analyzed your 20 search results, and then we built this ML model, and oh, by the way, we just averaged a bunch of queries that all use different elements of the algorithm, and so you're just getting this bundle of junk as recommendations instead of something high quality.
And I can imagine a lot of people would take that and go, oh, this applies to every vertical, or this correlates with everything. So yeah.
Yep. You gotta be super careful, right? And pay a lot of attention to, I think for us we have to pay a lot of attention to not just what correlates and where machine learning can take us from a predictive standpoint, but also to recognize that you're going to need a large quantity of data and a lot of true in the search results tests to confirm any hypothesis or any suggestions. So related topics was a good example of that, right? So we're extracting all these topics, but we could see that by taking a page that was targeting keyword and adding related topics to it, it just ranked better. It was pretty one-to-one. Okay, you take the topics that Google already says are on the pages that rank well. Great, fantastic. Put those on your page, and like you tend to move up in the rankings. And at the very least, you're definitely not moving down. So like we're not giving bad advice. We can feel confident about releasing that feature.
Yeah.
But it's a tough thing. You know what? The last thing we would want to do is give people bad advice.
Absolutely. So what's up with the inbound marketing movement? Do you think that's, I mean, I consider myself an inbound marketer, or the T-level marketer that you've sort of described previously. But it seems like it's not taking off the way that a lot of people had envisioned, and people are still specializing in individual arenas.
I think you've nailed it exactly. I think there's a lot of folks who say who don't think of themselves as inbound marketers, even if they do focus on one or two channels or specializations that fit into the inbound marketing world. And then I think there's also a lot of folks who say they're inbound marketers, but even in saying that, say, but my specialties are, you know, this channel or this channel or this tactic or this specialization. And that's totally, I think that's totally fine and legitimate and reasonable. There's so much competition in each of these channels that it seems obvious in hindsight why you would specialize, right? And why you wouldn't just have generalists who work on every single aspect. Be caught up in the language and in the idea of a shared digital marketer who concentrated on non-paid channels, becoming something that a lot of small and medium businesses would use, when in fact what ends up happening is a lot of small and medium businesses hire for the one or two channels that they care most deeply about and contract out a lot of the rest, or just don't focus on them. Yeah. And that is also the case for consultants and agencies. They specialize and then they outsource or they subcontract or they refer for non-specializations. Yeah, this one is, you know, social media marketers. There's social folks who are focused purely on engaging in social conversations. There's folks who are focused on social listening. There's folks who are focused on brand building. There's folks who are focused on traffic driving from social, from getting value for SEO from social, right? Like all these different things.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just like SEO, right? And I think the same is true in content marketing. There's people who are content strategists and then content developers and you know, folks who focus on B2B leads from content, folks who focus on brand building through content, who focus on native advertising, right? Like all these million different things.
Reputation marketing.
Right?
Yeah.
Sure, yep.
So I'd like to get a bit personal, if that's okay.
Sure.
On the podcast with Jerry Colliner, you talked about depression and the loop. I've had personal experiences with what you describe. How important is this as a topic to discuss and get out there? Because it seems that it's a subject that's not often discussed. Yes, there are entrepreneurial, you know, suicides happening, and you know, for listeners, what exactly is the loop, and how did the loop consume you, and how did you eventually break out of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people have a different description or a noun that they use to describe it, but for a lot of folks who are suffering from mental and emotional issues of all different kinds, there's this facet of the process wherein you get kind of trapped in your own mind's cycle, where you build things up, a problem, and it overwhelms your thoughts and oftentimes pulls you away from doing critical bodily care and emotional care types of things, right? Like maintaining your relationships well, and you know, thinking positively about yourself and about the future, and getting good sleep and good exercise, and you know, self-maintenance and all those kinds of things. And as a result, you almost get a reverse of the flywheel concept, where you every bad thing you are doing to not take care of yourself builds upon the despondence and the frustration and the anxiety or depression or whatever it is that you're feeling. Situation's worse and worse, and that you know, that's something that is a very hard. The longer you're in it and the harsher it is, the harder the cycle is to break it. It's not too dissimilar from, although in concept at least, although certainly physiologically it's different from addiction, right? Addiction kinds of behaviors where you,
Sure.
the the more you do the thing, the more you crave the thing, the more that takes over every other aspect of your life, and the more you need the thing to escape the fact that your life is dominated by this addiction, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. And you've mentioned in posts that when you encounter conflict that you often disengage.
Yeah.
How do you plan to engage more or perhaps use the disengagement to your advantage?
If only that were the case. No, I think the so the tough part for me is when there's disagreement. Um, I I do a thing that I think a lot of us do, although it's not healthy, and we all know it, which is if I don't get my way, I disengage. Um, so it's not the conflict or the disagreement itself. It's the the I was not listened to or whatever, right? That kind of
Yeah,
mentality. And
yeah.
that is super childish. It is so immature. Um, and yet, I can identify it in myself, and I feel myself fighting it. I don't have a good answer for you. You know,
Okay.
grow the fuck up, right? Like, come on, Rand, just be an adult human being. Suck it up. You're not always going to get your way. You need to commit and work hard, even if you disagree fundamentally. And that, I don't know. That's just something I got to learn to do. It's
Hey,
either that or, yeah,
we all have our inner childs, and it's something
yeah.
that, we learn to manage, and it's one of those things. It's, it is what it
Yeah,
is.
it's just it's so frustrating, right? Because it's something that obviously, every every person I ever hired, when I was CEO and I was a manager and that kind of thing, every person I ever worked with, I asked them to do exactly that, to engage in conflict thoughtfully, and even when they disagreed, to continue supporting and putting their hard work behind it. And yeah, like, come on, man, you gotta if you're gonna ask, you better deliver.
Another topic very close to your heart seems to be transparency. You've even described it as an addiction on a couple of occasions. Why is
Yep.
transparency so important for you, and where did your transparency addiction come from?
I think it came from a childhood and an early adulthood where um, there was a lot of non-transparency. Um, that's both like family side and sort of growing up side of things, and also early career, especially with hiding debt, and with hiding the fact that we were very, very unsuccessful, but we're still trying to pitch clients, in our early days of consulting, like we were these um, folks who could help them out. And that experience made me want to be extremely transparent so that there would be no skeletons in the closet. And then over time, I think it's also grown into an addiction because I have seen and felt the benefits of it. And this might be my own selection bias, but or exposure bias, but I feel like in every world, in the political world, in the science or STEM world, in the world of startups and technology and entrepreneurship, in the worlds of marketing, anytime you see opacity or secretiveness, there's almost always something bad behind it, right?
Hmm.
And or it has bad results, even if there's nothing at all bad behind it. There's almost
Right.
always bad results. And on the flip side, when you are transparent, uh, the the harsh criticisms that you expect turn into words of kindness and praise a lot of the time, because you were out in front with it and you didn't try and hide what was going on. Um, and I hate the idea that there's something for people to find out. I don't want there to be anything for people to find out. I want it all to be right out there in front. And that's, yeah, it's created plenty of conflict, like especially recently, man. It's probably the most transparency challenged time I've had in my professional career at Moz. certainly since we got funded. And yeah, not fun, but hopefully still the right thing to do, and definitely the only way I know how to live.
You previously said transparency for me is a reaction. It's a rejection of the things I hated to having to deal with in my past, and a value that I cling to, so I hopefully won't have those same issues in the future. It's an perception that makes me more critical than is probably fair to individuals and organizations who fail to be transparent. Google. Um,
They're not the only ones.
so,
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, my politics are pretty clear, but like I'm a very relatively passionate and ardent supporter of progressive politics in the United States. But I'm deeply critical of the Democratic presidential candidate, when this campaign is Hillary Clinton, of her secretiveness. I think that I think she's been shooting herself in the foot for a long time by being very secretive. I understand the motivations behind it. Like, I totally get it. Just like I understand Google's, right? Like, I understand why Google is very secretive. They had long scares and have continued to have them with spam and manipulation. I think there's a deep culture inside the company of fear about being gamed and manipulated. I see this in all sorts of business and technology worlds. Uber is a very secretive company about a lot of their operations. I understand why that is too. I just don't agree. Like, I think that many of these problems would be solved through transparency and wouldn't even exist if you had transparency. And I believe, Google in particular, if Google were much more transparent about how things work, they would see more people trying to game, and they would also see a tremendous number of contributions by all of the rest of us trying to stop them, and trying to help Google, rather than going, well, shit, there's nothing we can do. You've given us no tools to assist you, but you make that more transparent, and that becomes open. I respect that in sort of all fields, and I think it's just a general good. I'm not saying that all the time it is always the best and right thing to do, but I think in the long term, it's a value that has tremendous benefit.
Definitely. How important is it to be kind to others?
I think this is, in the order of operations of Moz's values, empathy is the only thing that sits above transparency. And there's oftentimes a lot of tough trade-offs. For example, the blog post that I wrote recently about Moz's return to SEO and about the layoffs that we had was significantly, first version of it was entirely thrown out and completely rewritten because it prioritized transparency over empathy and kindness. So for me, that's a very, very important thing. But it's also something I struggle with when it comes into conflict with transparency. It really is. I would say that order of operations is one of the hardest things for me in my both personal and professional life.
What's one of the biggest takeaways from your CEO swap with Wil Reynolds?
I got a really great sense of what it was like to be in a sizable agency again, and to see how client relations and how distribution of labor worked, the challenges of maintaining customers and doing sales, and that's a complex answer, but to simplify, I would say I gained a tremendous amount more empathy about the complexities of running an agency and the challenges that an agency faces, which I never had at Moz, because the biggest we ever were when we were a consulting agency was 6 or 7 people.
Yep. I interviewed Rand, that's you, Wil at MozCon. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, cool.
So that's going to come out soon. Is inbox zero good practice, and why is it part of your daily routine?
I don't know if it's a good practice, actually. I was reading, a lot of CEOs, a lot of folks who have very stressful demands on their time. Box zero, they delete or ignore a lot of their email. It's just an empathy thing. I remember when I was early stages of my career in the SEO field, and I would email influential folks, and I'd never hear anything back from them. Me on occasion, I will occasionally email someone and just never get a reply. And I hate it. I just despise it, and so I want to make sure that I'm not that person. And so if you send me, I would say, a well-formed, reasonable request that looks like a real conversation, I will always try and reply to those. And so that's my goal around Inbox Zero, is kind of an empathy thing.
Yeah, cool. How is work on your book progressing, and can you talk about that for a minute and go through what your vision is and what it contains and when we can see it?
So December 31st, I'm supposed to turn in a finished rough draft, which can be a very, very rough draft, but I have 5 chapters out of 16 done. So I am sweating it. It is, especially with the changes to Moz, I was making reasonably good progress into July, and then the last 2 months have just been, Moz has eaten up all my time. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen for sure. I will say that the book is focused on transparency, on telling some of Moz's stories, but not as much as it was previously. So it's less a story of Moz and more here are a number of important lessons learned that are very different from what you're going to hear in the rest of the entrepreneurship worlds. Oftentimes my advice is entirely contrarian to classic things, EVP versus MVP being a good example of that. And then lots of examples of those from Moz and other places.
So finally, what impact do you want to make on the world, and what lasting legacy do you want to leave behind?
I mean, I hope it's 2 things. I hope that it is SEO is more understandable and accessible to anyone who wants to learn it and anyone who wants to practice it. And I hope that it is also tag fee, that people recognize both the contributions that those values can make to a system overall to make it more equitable and to make the world a better place, but also that I hope that that if Moz can have success, I think tag fee can achieve much greater amplification as a set of values that other businesses and other entrepreneurs will consider, which is a lot of stress. That's a lot of stress on Moz, right? It's like, succeed, or the values that I care about will not receive the recognition and amplification that they deserve. But
you've built
that's how it is.
It's a laboratory. Back of it. You've built an amazing community off the back of that, and so it's something you should be proud of.
Oh, thanks, man.
I really appreciate your time, Rand, and all the work you do for the industry, and thanks for letting it go a few minutes over time.
No problem.
Really appreciate it.
You bet, dude. Great to see you, Woj.